Welcome to another weekly featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, James Moffat, where he will gracefully take our featured guest on a personal and business journey and stories that will inspire, educate, and engage you.
Hello, and welcome to another Friday Featured Business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, myself, James Moffat. Today we have our 137th guest. Wow. Frances Henderson. So, Frances, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to meeting you, James.
Yeah, so we have met virtually because we're both in the same book club. Right.
Yes,
so we'll come on to that shortly because your book is intriguing and I want to learn more about it. But before we get there, let's just take you down memory lane and learn a little bit more about who you are. So, Frances, so where are you originally from and where are you living now? And how did you end up getting to where you are now?
Well, I grew up in San Francisco. I was born there. I grew up in San Francisco. And I went, eventually, I did some university. Then we went to Japan with my husband, my then husband, who's dead now. And I went to Japan and we were there for 2 years teaching. And then we came back and there were no jobs when we got back. So my husband really wanted to look at Australia. So we went there and I'm the one who stayed. He left, but I stayed. And I'm very happy here. And there aren't as many guns. There aren't as many homeless people. I was able to raise my children without any of that. And there's no Donald Trump either. So I think I'm in a very good place, a very good place. I'm not very American. I've been out of the United States for nigh on almost 50 years. I've been away from the United States. So I don't really know that much about what's going on, except what I listen to it every day just to keep up with it. But how I got here is a very long story, but my interest, I do have a degree in visual arts and I have a degree in art history and I have a degree in education. So that's my background. So, but people expected, because the name of my book is The Seduction of Metal, they thought I was going to talk about sculpture because I was a sculptor. Because it kind of sounds like, a very sculpture thing. And I said, well, no, and it's not anything to do with art either. But it was something that I independently researched for about 5 years. And I was hooked. I loved prehistory. So I did this book and I'm excited about it. I really enjoyed doing it. I loved it. But it was hard. It's hard to write a book. It's a very alone thing, isn't it? Writing.
It is. I mean, I write children's stories, which are
wonderful,
pretty easy going in comparison. But now, as part of this book group, I mean, we are taking previous guests. So there's 11 of us, or 12, including me, that we're writing our chapters within the book. And yeah, it's actually quite a challenge when you knowing how to start it, how to keep the audience engaged, and then how you're going to conclude the book. And with having people reading it all and wanting to read it. So it has been a massive learning exercise for us to learn how to write, how to captivate an audience and using the right wording and everything else. And I mean, we were on a minimum of 10 revisions, right? But we're getting lots of support from obviously Paul, our publisher and editor. So So great fun. And you meet some fantastic other authors on that journey. So writing all sorts of different books. So it's great. So this is how we met. So I am interested in your story. So with the book, we'll just come on to the book shortly, but your background then, as in education and how you, what was your education like? Because I know it's a lot to do with, you mentioned about you training as well and kind of teaching it, I guess. So could you just tell us?
But I've done a zillion different things. I've done, I went to Puerto Rico because my grandmother was married to an executive who happened to be in Puerto Rico for a while. So she sent me a ticket. And I was doing, believe it or not, pre-med in California. And I wanted to be a psychiatrist. So I was sent to work with mental patients. That's what I did in the beginning. When I was a baby student, that's what I did. And so when I went to Puerto Rico, I lied my way into their mental hospital so I could see what it was like. And that is worth a book by itself. It was out in a jungle, in a Quonset hut, and these old decrepit buildings where all these vines were growing through. And we went in on a Jeep, and the guy sat on the hood of the Jeep with a machete, cutting the stuff as we went through. That's how primitive it was. And I was 21, nothing scared me. No, I wasn't afraid of anything. And they had one psychiatrist there and for 1,500 patients, and they'd be pulling on his white coat and stuff. And it was incredible. It was an amazing experience. So I did things like that. I would do crazy stuff, just to find things out. I'm very curious about things. So I did that. And, but I gave up my idea about being a psychiatrist because I had to be a doctor first. And I realized I didn't like being around sick people, didn't like sticking the tongue depressor in. I know, I don't like that. So I gave it up. And the dean of medicine said to me, "You're really a born teacher. You would probably make a lousy doctor, but you're a great teacher." So that's what I pursued, and I loved it. It was a niche. And if you want to know how to write for people, all you have to do is teach somebody about 17 or 18 years old because they're bored at the drop of a hat. So you have to make it really scary and interesting for them, or else they won't stay with you. So you have to create this thing. And you have children yourself, so that's a big jump there. And you can tell them stories, and they're connecting with you, And it's a wonderful thing when you connect. You can do the voices and all that stuff. So that's how and when I retired, I wanted to continue teaching, but I didn't want to do face-to-face. So I thought, I've got all these notebooks of research that I've done. I'm going to turn it into a book. And I did. And it took like 5 drafts before I was happy with it. And it's a big book. So think about how long that took. But I think you have to be picky and fussy about it. You can't just write anything. You have to think it out. So I did. And yes, Paul's been a wonderful mentor. He's really a top guy, and he's a wonderful editor too. So you're in the right hands here, because I know he can do it. He's good at it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so fascinated by your story, and I don't want to kind of go back and dwell on something that could be a completely separate show on a different story. But that experience, and I did something similar when I went to Romania in 1989, and we went to the orphanages that were in the middle of nowhere, and basically a similar experience. Most of them, or if not all of them, had disabilities, which probably some of them could definitely have been cured if they had the right treatment and stuff at the time, but they were kind of left there neglected. But that's a another story we can share another time. But that story, I mean, to have so many mental health patients there, and only one person that could look after them,
I think they let me in. They let me in because they thought, well, I'll go back to the United States and I'll jump up and down because they're a protectorate of the United States. So they thought I'd convey all this to the right person. And I did write a letter to the California governor about what was going on there, and whatever happened to it, I don't know. But I really felt for this doctor. He was very sweet. He's really sweet with the patients, which is incredible when you talk about 1,500 of them. And some of them had elephantiasis, these huge legs, because it's spread by a fly or something, tsetse fly or something. And it's a disease. And they're out in the jungle. It's a tropical jungle, and they're in the middle of this thing. So they were all quite ill, physically ill as well, with malaria, stuff like that. So it was quite a thing to see. It really was.
Quite an eye-opener, and quite shocking.
Yeah, it was. It was. But when you're 21, I'm telling you, nothing phases you. You think, oh, well, yeah. And I was moved by it, but I wasn't frightened by it. But I'd already spent 4 or 5 years working with mental patients in California in a mental hospital. So training there with them and learning the medications and all that stuff. That's what you do, and watching psychiatrists work is fascinating.
Yeah, I know we don't want to hijack the show to go into that, but there is a mental health problem globally at the moment. I mean,
yes.
I mean, it's kind of, I mean, nobody likes to talk about it, but I mean, it's over the last few years in particular. I mean, it's grown in every country. I think everybody has been affected by what's been going on in the last few years. And whether it's a mild case of like disturbance or whether it's something serious, as in bad enough that people are committing suicide, I mean, there's a huge problem. And
well, it is, but we're talking about probably 3 to 5% of the world's population. And the reason I say that is because what I think is happening is we're just identifying them a lot better than we did 100 years ago. Now we know, if this person is bipolar, we can see, we can watch what's happening and we can identify. But 100 years ago, they couldn't do that. So they might have just said, well, this person's crazy, whatever. And now we have all the statistics. Now we know what we're dealing with here. And autism is practically, I mean, that wasn't recognized 50 years ago. And it is now. And we're trying to figure out why. Why is this happening? So, and the thinking now, I can tell you that the thinking now is that older men who have children are more at risk of having this child. Whereas women, it was always Down syndrome, right? That was to do with women, but they're beginning to think that because we get married older and we have children older. I mean, I had children older, I was not young when I had my kids. And that was kind of scary, but you have to have the gene for it. See, if you don't have the gene, you got nothing to worry about. It is genetic, definitely genetic. And it's not horrible either, because I had a young girl who was really brilliant, but autistic. And her dad is he was at the Smithsonian. They're here now, but he used to teach and work at the Smithsonian, and he was autistic. So, they'd be Asperger's, they're higher up on the spectrum, but still it shows you that they can lead a pretty normal life. So that's the good thing. So there's some good to come out of all this research, for sure. There is.
Yeah, there's definitely Yeah, yeah. As we're saying, we talk about this subject a lot. My guest last week from Alaska, and she was talking about autism and mental health as well. So I mean, it is a huge problem, and maybe the statistics, we get more granular information these days. But in saying that, yeah, I think, yeah, there's just huge problems everywhere. I mean, it's quite ironic. We were talking about titles for our books, and
yeah, I know you were. I was listening to I was reading all this that you guys wrote.
Yeah, I mean, for the subtitle, we're thinking of well, I can't even remember what it was now, but yeah, you could identify a problem with everybody. So everybody has a mental, whatever you want to call it, emotional, I wouldn't say mental, I'd say emotional challenge. Anyone that doesn't, would be a liar, because everybody does. I mean, basically the whole population has a challenge, not necessarily a problem, but a challenge of some sort. But anyway, that's another subject. So let's just kind of move on. So let's talk about more about the book then. So just go back to the title of the book. So just tell us the title again.
The Seduction of Metal. And the reason I called it that is because the 𝗬𝗢𝗨𝗪, who are a prehistoric Central Asian nomadic tribe. And what you have to appreciate about this is that they were much more advanced at using metal than was Europe. They came upon this much earlier. And the reason for that is that they couldn't farm. Farming is out of the question in Central Asia, except in little small patches, because it's just desolate. So what they did was they raised cattle and moved them around with the climate and stuff. But they also understood metal. They got to metal straight away. They knew what it was, and they learned how to forge it very fast. And so when they invaded Europe, the first thing they want to do is, where's the metal? So, and by that time they were able to forge bronze, which is pretty advanced. And they taught the Europeans as they moved around, but they also had the dialects all over the place. And then they were picked up, and they gradually got to be Germanic tribes, and they had it, and the Italians and this and this and this. They all had Proto-Indo-European dialects, which became languages in the end. But the real desire, the real reason they got spread around was because they wanted to trade for metal. So the metal was the big thing, not the languages. Right? Does that make sense?
It does.
It was. That's what they took.
So you're fascinated. Is this your first book you've written?
Yes,
right.
But not my first. I've written a thesis twice, so
okay.
I'm not a stranger to writing. But yeah.
So just quickly on the book, because then I want to take you back a little bit. So on the book, right? How long have you been writing it now?
I think I'm in my seventh. Yeah. I'd say about 7 years.
Wow.
But it's very complicated. Studying prehistory is very hard, because you have to go into, people are doing research currently and stuff, and it keeps changing, so I had to keep changing things all the time, because somebody discovered something in Romania or, some other place. So it's taken altogether 7 years, but I've just given Paul the last chapter. So it was all written when I approached him. The draft was written and completed, but we've gone through it and refined it quite a bit. So yeah, we're only a matter of months away from it now.
Right. So
I'm pretty excited.
You've got the title. You've got the book cover and everything. You've done that part as well. right? So everything is good to go. So when do you plan to launch it?
Well, Paul's the person you have to ask about that, but I think he's trying to get it to before the end of the year, because they're supposed to be designing the book cover now. So
all right,
that's where we are now.
You're in a
So
similar,
it's pretty close.
you're in a similar position to us. So we're just finalizing or fine tuning our chapters.
Yeah.
And
we've
got the cover, or at least some draft covers and titles, subtitles.
Yeah.
So it'll be a big book launch at the end of the year. So going back, so how did you get into this? I mean, you mentioned also, I know in the notes prior to this, I mean, you mentioned about archaeology and your fascination with that. So where did that come from? I mean, going from where you talk about kind of the mental health and being a trainer and teacher and whatever, where did the archaeology come from?
Well, when I was 5 years old, my favorite show on television was on Sunday, and it's called What in the World? And it was from the BBC, and they had 3 contestants on the show, and they were all archaeologists. And then they'd show this amazing thing on a turntable, and we'd turn around, and they had to tell you when it was made, and what it was, and what was the culture. And they go back and forth, and I was utterly fascinated with that. My parents thought this kid needs therapy or something. How come? Why aren't you watching cartoons and all that? And I'd say, I just love this. I love it, and I never lost my love of it. Never. It's been with me all my life. And I didn't do archaeology because I hate bugs. And I was thinking, if I have to go out in a field, and, I'm going to see some ugly, horrible bugs going to come out. I don't want that. I can't stand it. So, I thought we'll all be an armchair archaeologist, which is pretty much what I am. I take their theories and I interpret them my way. So that's what I did. But
is there any?
I just didn't like bugs.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, are there any particular eras of archaeology that fascinate you the most?
Yes, what I've just written about is the Bronze Age, which is so fantastic. It's like an early form of capitalism almost, because they're multinationals and they're trading this stuff like man. See, what people don't realize is that ancient people were far more advanced. They're not like the Flintstones. No. They aren't going around wearing a fur and doing all this. No, they're trading big time back and forth, and they're really very sharp. Very sharp. We get our love of status from them. We get our love of luxury from them. They love luxury. And they're looking in this little, they're in this pit in north of England or something, and they're pulling out a string of Baltic amber beads. It's got to be 6,000 years old, and it had to have been imported to England. And yet, see, they were going to have it no matter what. I want the nice stuff. And you see that all through prehistory, how much they love it. And they always pick nice places to have their tombs, fancy, nice places with a nice climate and all that stuff. So they had, we've inherited that. We've inherited all that stuff. And unfortunately, hierarchy, which goes with all of that, But I'm fascinated by it. Absolutely fascinated.
Yeah, you mentioned prior to the show, we were just having a chat. You mentioned about kind of as there was kind of a war on as well, and a big part of the European population were destroyed. So, can you share more about that?
Yes, they what I started the book with is showing that early mankind were killers. If there were other people wandering around trying to get trying to hunter-gather, and you're bigger and stronger than he is, you're going to clobber him to death because he's taking your food away. And the Central Asian nomads are very primitive in that respect. Territory was their life. If they didn't get the territory, they didn't get their cattle fed. And they would kill other people who got in the way. And when they invaded, they went over the Carpathian Carpathian Mountains and came down to the basin. It was an invasion of screaming, yelling, horses, cattle, just this huge thing that came in and would have terrified the little Europeans who were down there farming or something. And they just took over and they killed them. As many as they could find. They just kill everybody. But another thing they had was that they were immune to the plague, because the plague actually is born in the Gobi Desert, right? That's where it came from. That's where the rats came from. And this was one of the earliest invasions that involved, it was almost like germ warfare, and they carried it, but they may have got sick, but they never died from it. They were tough, big, tough guys. And of course, the Europeans had no antibodies, like COVID, they had no antibodies, so they dropped like flies. So not only they kill everybody, but they gave them their diseases, right? And that happened throughout history with Indians and all that stuff, and that's what happened. And that's why there were so few Europeans left. It's amazing. But we didn't even know this until after the year 2000. We did, it was finally put together. And so I had to write about it.
Yeah. So you also mentioned, I mean, that's quite shocking, actually. And then how the population must have grown again afterwards and everything changed around.
Yes, but we could also drink milk after that, because they brought the enzyme for digesting milk, which Europeans couldn't digest until they got 𝗬𝗎𝗪 DNA, and they started being able to tolerate milk, which is interesting. Then they could have cheese and yogurt, all that stuff. Before that, they would get sick on it. They didn't have the digestive enzyme to be able to take it.
Yeah, which is quite ironic, because a lot of Asians actually they're either lactose intolerant and have problems with milky products and cheese and yogurts and stuff like that. Whereas
they're not 𝗬𝗎𝗪𝗧. They're not 𝗬𝗎𝗪𝗧. These 𝗬𝗎𝗪 are kind of Turkic. They're a mixture of Turkic and hunter-gatherers from the northern areas. Think Sami and stuff like that. Yeah. So they weren't Mongol. They weren't Mongol. But yeah, so they brought more. They brought a lot with them. And archaeologists call that a horizon when they bring everything, or a package. Call it the package, like the beaker package means that they brought more than just one thing.
Yeah.
But they embellished European culture in a way that was never done before. And we've never been the same either.
So to do this study, to be able to write the book, so where do you start? Because you said you're kind of an armchair researcher. So yeah. How do you do it? And what do you use to do the research?
Well, you can go. I used universities because I had a reader's ticket. So, I did postgraduate work. So I've got a reader's ticket so that I can get in and read stuff that's fairly rare. But the other thing I got to do is when these big universities subscribe to all these academic sites like JSTOR, and there's a whole slug of them that other academics use, so they can talk to each other and send each other papers. So I would get the papers. I got to read all of that stuff and make notes on it. So it's great. And they let me copy it. So I had copies of that. I could sit down and read it. So I spent a lot of time in libraries doing that. There are ways to do that. And I have a friend who taught at Rutgers. His name is 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥, and he's a very well-known anthropologist. And he and I have known each other a long time. And I'd write to him and I'd say, "Does this sound right to you?" And run it past him. And he was very supportive, very, very supportive, and very successful, a very successful anthropologist. So I was glad to get his input. I really was. But,
So
we did. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so with the book, I mean, do you have an ideal reader in mind that would be interested in this?
Yes. They have to be fairly well educated, but I want it to be read as popular history. So I want it because that's what I taught. And I want ordinary people to be able to get something out of this. And some of the chapters are actually funny. So, it tries to engage you with fear, shock, that kind of thing, because that's what you do to teach. That's how you teach. And teaching, to me, I used to say to my students, teaching is performance. It's acting, right? It's just a form of acting. It's theater. Teaching is theater. And so you've got to get your theater stuff together. You've got to say, the kids would come in and I'd say, well, if anyone has a weak stomach, there's the door. You can just sit outside while I do this because you're not going to be able to cope with it. Well, I'd have everyone glued to their seat. Not a single person would leave. Yes, I want to see that. Yes. And you do things like that. I used to call Northern Europe all the way out to the Gulag archipelago. I used to say, now that's the spooky zone. Why is it spooky? Well, I'm glad you asked. Yeah. And so that's how you hook them in.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. I mean, hooking them and captivating them, that they're on the edge of the chair wanting to know more. Right. And making it interactive, like asking them the questions as well. But what you said, I mean, it just made me think of the song, "Life is a cabaret, old chum," because everything that you see on TV is typically a play. I mean, it's a show, and it's to hook the audience. I mean, whether it's good for good purposes or bad purposes, it's still a show. And
it's definitely a show.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I mean, as part of that show, just digressing a bit, you have to learn some tactics like NLP to practice some neuro-linguistic programming, as in answering open questions, closed questions, reversing everything around, and so it is a show, and some
it's definitely a show, and
I just need to ask
infotainment, if you will.
Yeah, entertainment. It is for entertainment. I just need to ask a question. Behind you, is that the moon I see out the window? Or is that a reflection of the...
But we just had a big blue moon. We had a blue moon last night, and it was so huge, and it was blue over the Pacific. I'll tell you, it's to die for.
But that is the moon in the background. It's not a reflection. So, it's not the light in the...
I don't know. Because I'm not seeing what you're saying, but we're in a full moon now. Are you in a full moon? And does it work? I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I understand anything about, astronomy? No.
Yeah, I was just seeing if I could see the rocket, the Indian rocket that's landed on the moon. Right, or was that an Atari Space Invaders game? Oh no, we digress. So sorry. Anyway, I've just seen if I could see it in the background there, but So I mean, so you're also, I mean, you talk about archaeology. I know in the notes you also mentioned things like Stonehenge and other places. So what's the fascination there?
People said to me, well, you might be disappointed. Oh, no, I wasn't. I was absolutely in awe of it. I just had to sit there and look at it for about an hour, just because it is, you experience it. It's not just like looking at it. There's something about it. It is metaphysical, and I can't describe it. It's just an incredible feeling. It's meant to be part of what's called a sacred landscape. So it's one of many things in that landscape that we're only gradually finding out about. Like they found these huge pits now where you can drive a car into it, and that's part of the Stonehenge sacred landscape, and we don't know what they're for. But they're huge things, and they've been uncovered, and what are they for? We don't know. But there's lots of stuff like that at Stonehenge that is not. Mike Parker Pearson is Mr. Stonehenge because he's done all this stuff, 6 years of it, and an incredible excavation. So, it's well worth reading because he's like a guy with a spinning little thing, he loves it, and he's Mr. Action, and he writes like that. So, it's kind of fun.
So did you actually go to Stonehenge then? You were there in
Oh,
person?
yeah.
But
Yep.
yeah, I remember, from living in the UK, I went to see Stonehenge, but at that time you couldn't get that close. But before
No,
that,
you can't now either.
but before you used to be able to go right up and touch the stones. So was that the time that you went?
Well, I only went about 4 years ago.
All right,
So
okay, then obviously not. Then.
but I'll tell you a mad, amazing fact about it. One of the reasons that the stones move a little bit, which they do, is because of earthworms. Earthworms. And you believe that earthworms have moved the stones around? I can't get my head around it. It's just crazy. But yeah,
But
earthworms.
also it depends on how deep, I guess, you want to go, as in looking at the history of them and the position. Aren't they on sacred ley lines as well? So that's why.
Yeah, but they've been done by several different cultures over a 1,500-year period. So what they started out being, we're probably not real sure what it was supposed to be. But then they added stuff, and then people came along and said, gee, that stone would be great on my house. So they took it away. So it's probably not the way they envisioned it. But the Beakers, who are a culture, they are descended from the Ymnaya, and they had a lot of time spent in around England, and they finished Stonehenge. And we think, at least I think, that that's where they picked up on the setting sun and the rising sun and stuff like that, because they had think about these new agey religions where they're sitting around playing guitar and people are doing. That's kind of what I envisioned the Beakers to be. And they had beer, and they had these cups of beer, and they had barbecues, and on a massive scale. And this is all around Stonehenge, right? So they're like watching a performance, I suspect. And the culmination of it, the finale, is maybe the sun passing through this thing. And because according to Parker Pearson, this was, an event that was probably yearly, and all these people would come from everywhere, including Europe, and they converge on Stonehenge for this quasi festival or whatever it was. We don't know what they were worshiping, but I find that a really interesting vision of these guys. Fear and everything.
Exactly. There's so much kind of hidden history to learn about that.
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's fascinating.
it's changing all the time. What maybe have been taught at school might be incorrect because we're learning
Yeah,
more. So yeah,
yeah.
it's like anything. You have to do lots of research and then find out. And
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
there's lots of philosophies and discoveries and new ways. I mean, particularly when it comes to also about the pyramids. I mean, finding
Oh, yeah. Fascinating.
uh,
Fascinating.
new chambers and
Yeah.
where do they lead and why they were built and how
Mm.
come.
And how old is the Sphinx? That's
Yeah,
another thing that's being debated right now. How old is it really, and what is it really supposed to be? We don't know.
yeah, exactly.
We may never know.
And then how come there were pyramids built not just in Egypt, but I mean all over the world
Mm,
at the same
mm.
time? Yeah, did they get on the phone and say, "Well, I've got a blueprint here. I've got some diagrams of building a pyramid. Like, could you build one at the same time as us?" And I mean, so there's definitely hidden knowledge that we don't know anything about. We're quite, I mean, dumb in the way. I think you mentioned before. We underestimate how
Mm.
knowledgeable and how advanced previous
They were.
civilizations
They
were,
really were. Mm.
and now we're kind of the dumb ones in comparison.
Well, imagine the amount of heat that you have to generate to melt iron. And I've got it written down in the book how hot that has to be. So they had to engineer that. They couldn't just have a fire and it's going to get that hot. No, they had to figure out how to maintain it, how to send it through tubes and all this stuff. And they're doing this, oh, maybe 800 BC. They're doing this. And it's the birth of engineering. There it is. And they figured it out of necessity because they had to do this. They ran out of bronze, is what happened. And they discovered that iron is everywhere. So, we can use iron for the same thing, but it's a different type of metal. So it has to be worked in a different way. But yeah, yeah.
So
It's then you have to learn a little bit about metallurgy to really get the whole picture of the Bronze Age, because that's what it
yeah,
was.
yeah. I remember at school, I did metal work as a subject,
Hmm.
and
Oh, interesting.
we had a furnace there, and we would put our metal in there on these clamps, and then when it was
Hmm.
heated up to a certain temperature, we'd take it out, and then we would bash it obviously into shape. And yeah, as kids doing that, it was really fascinating because you actually see something that
Yeah.
was like now, I mean, solid and you couldn't bend it, and then you put it in and
Hmm.
you heat it up, and now, yeah, it can, I would say bend like a spoon, but if you could bend a spoon, but I mean, it would just melt like butter. I
Hmm.
mean, depending on how hot you got it. So,
I know, it's amazing. It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I had to learn to weld. As a
Oh,
sculptor, I had to
yeah.
learn to weld. Yeah, and I hated it. I would just, hold it like it's going to explode or something. But but I'm glad I learned it because it taught me something about metals,
Why were you learning how to weld?
because I started out as a sculptor in an art school. So,
But
it's
sculpting
the
with
art.
metal.
Yeah, yeah. I did. I sculpted with everything. I learned how to do it. So, and in fact, the guy who was my mentor there was from Aberdeen in
Yeah,
Scotland.
you could understand
Yeah,
him.
yeah. He was Jewish. He was very Jewish. Kind of an
Jewish
interesting.
with a Scottish accent.
Yeah, Mike Essen. His name was Mike Essen, and from good old Aberdeen.
Ah,
And he went to the whatever it is, the Royal London School of Art or something. And he was a glass guy. He made glass
oh,
sculpture.
very interesting.
Yeah, he was fascinating guy, really fascinating. And I thought, gee, this Scotland's so interesting. I'll have to go there once. And I did. I found it absolutely wonderful. What now I know what tweed is because you look at the hills in Scotland, they're tweed. these beautiful wildflowers. Oh, it was wonderful place. Absolutely wonderful. I'm so glad I went. It's a great place.
Yeah, I was born
Wouldn't
there.
miss. Huh?
I was born in
Yeah.
Edinburgh. Yeah. So,
Yeah. And that is a wonderful, wonderful city. Absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
Very erudite.
Scotland is really beautiful. I mean,
It is
the
really
nature,
beautiful. I
the
mean,
outdoors, the
it's
architecture.
yeah.
Yeah.
Everything about Scotland is
Maybe
beautiful.
not so much the weather, but besides that, it's
Well, you can't have everything,
yeah.
really.
And so
You want good weather, you can come down here. We've got great weather.
yeah, so
Yeah.
what season are you in at the moment?
Today is the first day of spring.
Ah,
Yeah, you know
congratulations.
but it's a cold day. It's 64 Fahrenheit or 17 Celsius today,
Yeah,
which was not a good day. That's not
well,
a warm
not
day
so
for us.
bad. That's
Well,
summertime
I
in
know you
Scotland.
think that. I know you think that. You're talking about Switzerland and Edinburgh, so it probably seems perfectly normal. But to us, that's a cold day.
Yeah, but for me, spring is my best season because everything's coming alive,
Mm,
and
mm,
you've got the summer to come. So
yeah.
spring is magical,
Yes, it is. It is.
and you have
But
a blue moon
yeah,
and a full moon. Right, couldn't be any better.
no,
You just
it
need
is.
a
It's a
glass of wine.
beautiful place. Yeah.
So, what's the time at night now there for you?
Um, it's 7:04
Ah, not too
at
late,
night.
but it's still quite dark
No,
then.
but we don't have twilight. I tried to explain that to Paul. It just gets dark. It just goes bleep like a curtain.
Yeah,
And in northern United States and probably in Edinburgh, it stays light quite late. You still have enough light to play games and do stuff before it actually gets dark. But here, it just goes down like a curtain, just boom, you know. The
yeah,
closer you get to the equator, the less they have that twilight, that interim time before darkness. It comes down like a curtain. So that was odd. That was hard for me to get used to.
yeah. I mean, I just looking out your window. I mean, so dark. I was thinking it's like 10 o'clock at night or something. But
No, 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 no. But see, we're just getting started here. By December, it will be, later, much later when it gets dark. Uh,
so,
but it doesn't slow it down. No, it just suddenly gets
yeah.
black. That's it.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier about. I mean, so how long have you lived in Australia now?
46 years.
Wow. And you said
Yeah.
you've got kids there that live there. Do they live there as well?
Yeah, they were born here. They were born here.
Yeah, there's many challenging things happening in the US at the moment. And
Yeah, very,
yeah,
very.
I mean,
And I'm glad my kids are here. They're safe. They're safe here.
yeah, I don't want to get into the politics there because there's kind of lots of things that yeah are just weird.
Yeah, but I don't really care about the politics. What I just care about is I hate the guns and what it's done to the country. It was terrible. And I had a father who he was an engineer and he was an officer in the Navy during World War II, and he hated guns. He wouldn't have a gun. He would never shoot an animal. He banned anything like that from our home, always. And so we did not grow up with guns, and most kids didn't. In my generation, we didn't know anything about guns. This is since the Vietnam War. This has happened. We didn't grow up with it. It's new. It's relatively new. So, it's not about politics. It's about, saving humanity, really.
Yeah,
It goes beyond politics.
yeah, I hear you in the way everything is about saving humanity and preserving humanity.
Absolutely.
I actually say
Absolutely.
there's three fundamental reasons why we're here. The first one is to learn,
Mm,
constantly learning.
Yes.
And second is to serve humanity. And the third, to preserve humanity for the next generations to come. Period. It's not about how big your car is and how much money you've got and all the materialistic things you've got. It's about helping one another. And if there's people around that are doing that, then great. Are the people that are destroying that, then got to question what is their object?
One of the interesting things that I discovered, I was able to meet up with an Irish archaeologist who had to do with Newgrange and all that stuff. He was fascinating. I spent the whole day with him talking about stuff. And in the parking area of Newgrange, which is fairly substantial, and it's got a Catholic church right on the grounds as well. And he said, we know there's archaeology down there, but we're saving that for the next generation. He said, they've got to have things like that to discover. That's how we get good archaeologists. So we save a lot of stuff for them. We know where it is, but we're not going to dig it up. So I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that
saving it for the future.
I think there's many places that are yet to be discovered and things yet to be discovered. And what we see is not always what it is. So our eyes deceive us a lot of the time. So, and I think hidden technologies that deliberately been hidden, I think will be exposed because, as you said, I mean, going back in time, their technology was so advanced, it doesn't just disappear. It's either hidden, right? And it's that coming to fruition. And in the way that we're learning about that will be the discoveries, particularly when it comes to energy, because I cannot believe that we are so backwards in energy technology when you just go back in time. There was never a problem. We've created the problem.
Right.
But anyway, that's another subject. So with the book, right? So the book is going to come out hopefully by the end of the year, and
that would be good. Yeah,
it'll be available. How will people get hold of the book?
I think Paul said it's going to be distributed. I don't know about England, but it'll come to it with Amazon. He's got a deal with Amazon, so I presume they're going to be the book distributors. And that's all I know. But I'm fairly well known here because I've taught thousands of kids. So I'm going to have the book launch here and see if I can't get the bookstores to carry it. And I think they probably will. That's it. Yeah. Okay. I don't know how many thousand kids I've taught, but a lot.
Right. So it'll be available in a physical book. What about audio or ebook?
Yeah. He's got a guy to read it. A British guy to read it. And he wants to hear what it sounds like. I would like to hear what it sounds like too, because we read it to each other. But it's impossible. No one should ever edit their own book because there's a lot of stuff that you miss. That's another person can point out to you. And I think, that's a very wise thing to do is get it edited. So he's been great too. He's been terrific. I'm so glad I met him. And he's a really interesting guy. And I think someone who's he's like you are and I am. We love learning new things all the time. That's the core of a human being, is to keep learning. And I hope that as your kids grow up, that they have intellectual curiosity, because I think a lot of kids I see they just don't care about knowing why or how, and it's important, I think, to instill that in children.
No, absolutely. And I think not stop them learning about technology, but not being obsessed with gaming and the stuff like that.
And don't do that. Yeah.
Because that is a huge problem with most parents, with kids constantly gaming. But it's so much of a push. I mean, they get it from their friends and everyone. But once again, that is another subject in itself. But you're right. It's the curiosity. I mean, I have curiosity. And if I can't learn that at school or wherever, then you have to do like you said, you have to do your own research and find out. And you can be an armchair researcher. And there's many places that
you can be.
You can look for the answers.
I love it so much. I've started another book, in fact, but this will be about modern history. Because I tell you, this was such a hard subject to research and took so long that I thought, no, make it easy on yourself. Do something you know about.
So there is another book coming.
Oh yeah, there is.
So you said this is going to be modern history, as in which era?
Yeah, this is going to be the 1950s, in fact. Yeah, because I chose it because it's very conservative, and so a lot of people fell afoul of this stuff, this super uptight conservative, and it was true in England. It was true, in the British Isles, in the United States, and in Australia. They were all these real uptight sort of laws. They kept people from doing what they wanted. And I've discovered some very famous people who fell through the cracks and did some awful things. I thought, yes, this is good. This is good. It's history. And they're interesting people. And all three of these countries, like Australia or Britain or the United States, they all had these incredible scandals that went on in the 1950s, and some of them were very serious. And it's fascinating. So I got really stuck into that. My subject, my major, when I went to graduate school, was German Expressionism, which I absolutely love. And especially, I like German Expressionist films. I love them. And I thought, if I run out of stuff to write about, I'd write about that, because that fascinates me. It's an endless fascination. They're as complex as anything you ever want to see, especially their films are just amazing. No money. They had no money at all. And the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, he's got these hand-painted mountains in the background. And it's fascinating. And they are fascinating. Germans are really interesting. Very complex culture, very much so. So, there's no end of history that you could write about. It's just boundless. Just pick a country and you could find something interesting, that they did. But I'm not too interested in the US now, because I've been away from it a long time. I do have one or two stories from that, but I'm really interested in Europe. I think Europe it has such staying power, and such diversity. It just fascinates me. And so does Britain. Britain never had a terrible time when nobody was doing anything. If you look at history, they're always doing something, and they're always at the top of things, and they still are. So I find that really challenging. That's an interesting thing. The sun might set on the U.S., but it's never going to set on Britain. I figure they're good for another 1,000 years.
Yeah, no, I think
because they're adaptable. They're beautifully adaptable to whatever's going on. They can do it.
You picked definitely an interesting time, the 50s, but so the focus will be on 3 particular countries or across Europe as well.
Yeah, I've got one really interesting story from Australia that involves somebody British. And I'm not going to I haven't even told Paul about this yet, but that's going to be a mind blower, because not very many people know about it. And there are a few other ones. There are a few other, and of course, you had all the spy scandals, which are amazing and strange, really strange. Yeah. Totally off. Yeah.
So
Off the air.
what made you pick that then?
What made me pick that?
Yeah, I mean the
Well,
50s.
well, the 50s. In the 1950s, you had McCarthy, right? Joe McCarthy, who influenced the United States for the next 50 years, even though he only opened his mouth for about 3 years and that was it. He died an alcoholic and he was also bipolar. So that explains a lot about him. But during that time, you had the Rosenberg trial where two parents are sent to their deaths and leaving two little boys orphans. I'm thinking, what is going on? That's terrible. And you had this guy who looks like he comes out of the Maltese Falcon, Whittaker Chambers, who is an ex-communist, and he hides this spool of tape in a pumpkin patch. And the FBI have to go and retrieve it, at the dead of night. How bizarre, how bizarre. Finds it in a pumpkin patch. And it just goes on like that, crazy stuff, really crazy stuff. And the people in Britain, these Cambridge Five, they do things like spill all the secrets all over the floor in a pub. They say, oh, sorry, we got to get all these secrets out. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So I thought, now I could hammer that into a book and it would be interesting,
Right. So typically, how long do you think it'll take for this one?
Not long. I'd say a year top, probably,
Oh,
because
wow.
the stuff is so easy to access. The research is easy to access. If you start trying to access prehistory, boy, I mean, it's like climbing Mount Everest, really. Trying to dig in and find out. But I did find out that they have these Denisovans, which they're the precursors of Neanderthals, and they're even older and even shorter and wider, and they're really something. And they lived in freezing caves and things. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we've just figured that out. That's like the last 20 or 30 years we figured this out. Yeah. And we didn't know they were there. And now there are 5 different humans that we've discovered, and 9 altogether. 9 that didn't make, most of them didn't make it beyond Paleolithic time.
I think there still are.
Weird.
I think there are still plenty of Neanderthal around.
Yeah.
See them on
Yeah.
TV
Do
all
you
the
know
time.
that yeah, but here's the amazing thing about Neanderthals. They didn't have a whole Neanderthal. So when they wanted to find out if he had a voice box, they had to borrow all the parts from all these different museums and actually build one, kind of like Lego. Put this guy together and figure out whether they had a voice or not. And their voice is supposed to be really high, like weird stuff. They're bizarre. They're bizarre. And how about the heads that they this artificial cranial deformity, and all the Huns had these weird things like Mars attacks. This huge huge head. Can you imagine being faced with that? You see all these Huns coming over a mountain, and they've got all these strange heads. That'd be scary. Really scary.
Yeah.
That's prehistory.
You'd never fancied writing a book about mental health then?
I could write about my experiences. Yeah. I had a lot inside and outside the mental hospital. It was amazing.
Because
it's an amazing
you mentioned that you lived in San Francisco. Wasn't Alcatraz at one time a mental hospital?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised.
I thought before it became a prison, I thought it was a mental hospital.
You may be right. But but you can't escape from it because it's surrounded by sharks and freezing water. Freezing water.
So they say, but it wasn't there. Well, I can't remember. There was many gangsters that were there. One disappeared at night and escaped.
Oh, yeah. There were 3 or 4 of them, and they tried to make an air mattress out of all this stuff. And they were never heard of again, but they probably got eaten by sharks. They probably did. My father, who, of course, he was a naval engineer, and he used to say to me, you wouldn't last more than about 3 minutes without a wetsuit in that, because they get the ocean current comes from Alaska. It's freezing in San Francisco. The bay never gets warm. And when my dad came here to visit me, he put his foot, because I'm right next to the beach, and he put his foot in the water, just threw that and said, it's warm. He didn't expect that. Oh my God, it's warm. Because it gets to be, 75 Fahrenheit. The water can get that warm here. And yet in San Francisco, it's about 32, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. That's near freezing. And it doesn't warm up. So, these guys, they were really safe having those prisoners there, because there's no way you're going to just swim it. You couldn't do it.
So I think with you and topics and experience, you could write a dozen books.
I mean, if I got the energy.
But it's kind of a hobby as well. I mean, it's fun to do the research and then to document it in a book.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun. It's hard, but it's fun. I call it a difficult pleasure. It is a difficult pleasure.
But you mentioned, I think the first book is always the hardest, because it's a massive, massive learning curve, as in style of writing. I mean, how, like, as we said, how you can engage with the audience and keep them captivated, that they want to read the story. And there's a lot to how you write, and we've done a dozen different exercises and made so many changes accordingly. So I'm looking forward to having this complete with the book that we're doing, and then starting my own book, because now I know kind of a methodology on how to do it. It makes it easier, because the planning part, once you understand the plan, then it's just about filling in the gaps. And I even found it hard to, how do you even start? You keep putting off writing because you don't, well, what would be the opening sentence? And why? And will that hook an audience to want to read the next sentence, and so on? So there's a lot to write in a book. I mean, I think some people are much more natural at doing it than others, and others find it extremely difficult. And there's a lot of kind of hand holding, which is great because Paul offers that. And we've all had dozens and dozens of Zoom calls with him to actually go through manuscripts and whatever. So
well, it's the same. It's the same with teaching drawing. I used to teach drawing, but one of the things about it is that when people start drawing, they'll put a few lines on it and go, no, and scrunch it up and throw it away. And I kept saying to them, you have to work a drawing. You have to work it. Okay, done. You can erase the line if you don't like it. You don't have to scrunch it up, throw it away. You have to develop it. And it's the same with writing, I think. If you write a few lines and you don't like, oh, I can't do this, well, you can. You just got to work it, You got to figure out what you want to say. You got to have a desire to do it.
So you just mentioned something that I didn't know. So, you were a teacher for art, as in...
Yes.
But drawing, as in what type of art?
Oh, well, when you're teaching in a high school, I taught seniors, right? And like you have a senior school in Britain, you've got the senior school and junior school. We have the same here, which I think is great. I think it's a very good system for teaching kids. I don't like middle school. I don't like it. Because when you have older kids, they become the role model for the younger kids. And the best kids are sent to deal with the difficult younger kids, year 7 and 8. And that works better than a teacher because they want to be like that person. So they behave themselves. And that's why I think the British school system is better. It's a better system. And it's also more academic, which I prefer. But yes, I taught drawing. I taught sculpture, of course, because I'm a sculptor, but sculptors have to be able to draw, right? Henry Moore has neater drawings than he does sculpture. I don't especially like his sculpture, but his drawing is first rate. And he's great at it. So, you do teach drawing because it's the basis of everything.
Yeah. So with I mean, you're very much into arts and archaeology and drawing. And what about other arts, as in music?
Music. I love music. I love classical music. I love all music. But I grew up, and when I went to and what do you call it, primary school? The first 0 to 6. That ours was the de facto music school. So everyone in school played a musical instrument. And we went to the symphony every month, San Francisco Symphony. So I've seen them all. I've seen all these famous conductors. And we would just sit there, we had to sit there as little 7-year-olds and watch the rehearsals of the symphony so that we could learn. So, and I played the cello. Everybody played a musical instrument. And that was wonderful grounding for me.
So I still love the cello.
Day. I played the cello, yeah. I was very perfunctory though. I wasn't great at it. But it taught me to love music. I love music.
I asked him in my questionnaire if you played an instrument or sang, if you'd want to do it. And you said no.
Oh, well, I haven't for a long time.
Well,
when I was a schoolgirl, I played the cello, but I didn't have a love of it the way I do art. Art was natural to me. And also I'm left-handed. So, and when I went to art school, I found that 1/3 of the students were left-handed, which I thought was amazing. It's the most left-handed people I've ever seen in one place. So it must have something to do with art. But it made it harder for me to play because you've got to use both hands, and I'm very left-handed. So that was a real trial for me to do that. But I picked the cello because you can sit down. I like that. I didn't want to have to work too hard. The violin, you got to hold it up. I thought, no, I don't want to do that. No, something easy.
Yeah. My eldest son, who's 10, he plays the piano. My younger son, who's a twin, he started the cornet. Right.
Wonderful.
And
that's wonderful.
And his twin sister, she plays the violin, or started with the violin. It's painful.
Do you know that it raises your IQ? Do you know that
it raises your IQ? It raises my hair, right?
Well, you have to live with it, but it does raise your IQ. Yeah. That's a fact. That's a fact. That's
I think playing any instrument, I mean, they're all kind of found what it is that they wanted, and we tried many instruments, and which is good.
Find one they like. Yeah. It doesn't matter what instrument, but the reading of music is a different language, and it's very abstract. So
exactly,
it creates abstract reasoning.
Actually, that's a very good thing, because we were talking prior to the show, we mentioned kids and languages, and I could put down music because my eldest son, he can read the music easily, right? To me, it's gobbledygook, but I mean, to him, right? Just give him the notes, and he knows. And I think, wow. So that you could put that on your CV, like languages. You could put French, German, English, and music.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely, music. Music is so great. You know, when Albert Einstein was asked what would happen if there was a nuclear bomb, he said, the worst thing is that we couldn't hear the music of Mozart. That was his answer. We can't hear it. And you can resonate with it.
Yes.
He was right. He was definitely right. But it
Yeah.
was this typically offbeat sort of, response. But it's true. It's
No,
true.
exactly.
And I think the world would be terrible without music. Music is
Absolutely.
marvelous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm glad you got your kids doing it. I made my kids do it. I'll tell you that. They did it. And from the age of 2, we started sending them to rhythm and music and stuff. The conservatorium here does a class for little kids, as they do in New York. They also do that in New York. So you can start them real
So
early.
your kids, how many kids have you got?
2
And
girls.
all right. And roughly what ages are they now?
Well, they're old now.
Oh,
Grace is 32 and Laura's 36.
all right.
Yeah, they're old now.
But they have any
But
kids? They have kids?
no, no.
Ah,
I'm not going to be a grandmother. I've already resigned myself. I'm not going to be a grandmother.
no, you might be.
People don't have kids much.
Uh,
Well, uh, I had my kids late, so I suppose they could do that, but they don't seem to have any desire to have them. And
uh,
I really wanted to have children.
yeah.
I was excited about
So,
that,
so
but they're not.
are your daughters excited about reading your book?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. They're so involved in their own world. You get this when they grow up, they just go, oh, I'm doing this now. Yeah.
Uh,
Both of them are well educated.
are they
So
right?
they've got their own deal.
Okay, but are they writers or not yet?
Laura she's the older one, and she's the CEO of a business which she started as very successful. And who would have thought she'd ever be a business person? We were amazed. But she's done really well and she likes it. But her father insisted she had to go to university, and so she did, and she's got a BA and a master's degree. So, but she's not really interested in what she learned at university. She owns a digital media company.
No, nice, very nice.
Yeah. So she does copywriting and publicity and builds
Ah,
websites and that kind of stuff.
she
That's
should
what she
be,
does.
yeah, she should be a guest on the show.
Yeah, oh, she'd love that. She'd love that. And
Mm.
she's very pretty as well. Um, then Grace does medical research for the University of New South Wales. So that is her job. And she's got 4 degrees of various sorts. She went to school in Germany for a while. She went to Göttingen, same one as Oppenheimer and the Grimm brothers. That's the university she went to. So she speaks fluent German. And she's got a degree in sociology, a degree in German. She's got 2 degrees in medical science. So
Wow.
she's well educated, but she's not materialistic. She wants to have a part-time job so she can have plants and things. She wants to grow plants. So the 2 are opposite. You'll find that when your children grow up. They'll be the opposite, especially same-sex kids. Will just, I'm not going to be like him. I'm going to do my own thing. That's the way they are. So they're not that into. I don't think that they think that I'm sort of a quaint eccentric or something. Well, mom's got a book. We don't know why she did it. They're like that. So
Yeah,
I accept that.
well, it's a different generation. I mean,
It is a
yeah,
different generation,
people
completely.
think you're either quirky or misunderstood
Mm.
because you're certain age or certain interests. But I mean,
Mm.
other people
Mm.
that are your age and have the same interests, then we can all be quirky together.
Yeah,
So,
exactly right. Well, my students, I have lots of ex-students. 25 of them became visual arts teachers, so I'm really proud of that. And yet, they're the ones who want to read the book. My own kids don't care, but my ex-students say, "Oh, when's it coming out? I want to read it." So that's a good thing. I've got a
oh,
little audience there.
oh, excellent. So anyway, we're just going to wrap this up now. So,
Okay.
Frances, you've been a fantastic guest. Are there any kind of closing comments or remarks that you want to, or words of inspiration that you want to share before we close this?
I think for all the people, especially people in the school, Paul's group, I think they just have to persevere. I think a lot of them would really like to do that, but the best way to learn to write is to do a lot of reading, you know, and I've had to do a lot of reading. So, and I think that taught me, if you read good writers, you pick up wonderful things from them. And, and I did. My grandmother used to write children's books, and she was a published writer. So she wrote our year 4 book. I'm sitting there, there's my grandmother's book. And it's great, it was nice. And she came to our school and had a little chat, so that was nice. So it kind of runs in the family. I can remember her allowing me to go sit in her writing. She had a writing office, as she write. And I got to go sit there and write for hours. And I was happy to do that. That's the kind of, I was kind of a weird kid. I was kind of a weird kid. But, uh, it's just the way I grew up. It's the way I grew up. But I felt very fortunate to go to the schools that I've been to. And I've been, I thank my teachers for a lot. Not my parents particularly, but my teachers. I do.
Yeah.
My
So,
parents were sort of, go do something. Don't bother me. Go do something.
yeah.
So
Yeah. I encourage my kids, particularly when it comes to, we do bedtime storytelling, and it
right,
started
that's
off
so good.
just reading a bedtime story book until my eldest son at the time, asked me, "Daddy, what about my adventures and my stories?" And that's when we changed it all around, and we created our own bedtime stories, which are just take it to another level. I mean, it's magical. But that's a whole story in itself. But anyway, Frances, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest.
Well, you've been a wonderful host.
Oh,
You've been a
thank you.
wonderful host.
Thank you. And yeah, from not knowing anything about you, I've learned something about you now. I hope the audience also, and that they can reach out and connect to you. So what's the best way if people want to connect with you?
They can just email me.
Right. Okay.
Just email me. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can
I'm
provide
not a real social media person. I don't have the time. My friends spend a lot of time on social media. Of course, my kids do too. Um, but I'm more reclusive than that, but I'll always answer any email. I do answer questions on Quora, which is kind of like Reddit, you know, and I answer history questions for them. So, and that's fairly formidable because it's all different kinds of history, but I find it interesting, and it keeps my mind sharp. So they can always reach me through Quora or they can just email me.
All right, perfect.
Right. All right.
Okay, so on that note, I will be in touch anyway because we're in the same book group.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm looking forward to launching our book and seeing the launch of your book, and then we can help
Yeah, it'd
promote
be
it
fun.
further then. So thank you once again, and enjoy the
Oh,
rest of
thank you.
the evening. You're welcome.
You too. Whatever
Okay.
time it is there. I think you've
Yeah.
got the day.
Yeah, it's just coming up to midday now, so
Beautiful.
yeah.
You're very lucky to live there, I think. What a great place. What a great place. Switzerland. Mm.
Well,
Couldn't
I
be
think
better.
home is where the heart is. It doesn't really matter where it is. So
That's right. That's
yeah,
right. You're
as long
right.
as you feel comfortable there, then that's the main thing. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, it was lovely to meet you. I've been waiting to meet you for some time now. Paul's been telling me about some of your things that you do, and it always sounds so interesting. Interesting. So
Yeah.
I'll try to sort of get involved in it as I come along. As soon as we get rid of this, get the book underway, it's been occupying me for, a lot of years. So I'll be glad to launch it finally,
Exactly.
and get on to something else, right?
Exactly. I'm looking forward to your next book already. All right.
Okay.
Okay, then.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Have a best. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Wow, that was another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact. If you'd like to be our next featured guest or learn how James Moffat can help you leverage on the art and power of interactive storytelling for your business, reach out and schedule a call now.